Hey, this is Danilo again. I wanted to tell you another story about when I was growing up in this house in Alaska, avenue called Hawkins. I hated headboards growing up. There was something about having that really close to my head that made me uncomfortable. And depending on what kind of headboard it was, it made me really uncomfortable that these gaps in the headboards were basically led to underneath the bed, which to me was horribly frightening, to think that there was something under there, and instead of just crawling up over the sides, it could just grab me from these gaps. So headboards were horrible. And I used to sleep in this twin-size bed, and it had a headboard because it was made to be a bunk bed, so it had a lot of slats in it, and the mattress was quite a bit smaller than the actual bed frame. So when you're laying in the bed, if you looked at the headboard, you could see like lots and lots of gaps, and you could see pretty far down past the bed. And I hated that. So I used to fill the gaps in my headboard with anything I could. I only had one pillow growing up, so I would take action figures or trucks and things, and I'd put them in the gaps between the headboards, toy robots. I would even sometimes grab socks and stick other clothing inside the socks, so I had this basically like a log of a foot or something, the socky log that I would stick between the headboard and myself, so I could feel comfortable that nothing could kind of reach and get me. And it was like that for years. I don't even remember when I started doing that. I would do something like this very often, where I would stick animals or giant robots in places where I didn't quite feel good about it. I remember doing that in the closet a few times. And we had these giant robots called Shogun Warriors, and I would stick them there, and they were like my guardians. And so headboards. So these headboards, they used to really freak me out. So I used to stuff things in them, and then that would help me fall asleep. Until my parents, they ended up upgrading their bed. So they gave me this large bed, which was like a full-size bed, and it had this horribly dark wooden headboard on it. And the thing about this headboard was it went up almost as tall as I was if I stood on the bed, and it had these like archway slats in it that they weren't just gaps, they were like little doorways to I don't even know where. I remember thinking, wow, these look like doorways. And then on the two edges, these two posts would go up, and on the very top, they weren't anything. They were just like these little design things up in the corners, but they felt like beings, not like people, but just like some weird. If you glanced at it or moved your eyes over it really quick, it felt creepy. So that bed was really scary, and I didn't have enough stuff to fill those holes in. So I started sleeping with, like, again, I would stuff my clothes, my socks with other clothes, and also some sheets and stuff, and I would put them around my head and my pillow, enough to where I felt like nothing, if these were doorways, that nothing could see me, and I could sleep, and it wouldn't be a problem. Like if somebody opened up one of these archways, and like, oh, nobody here, just go on to the next door, and then eventually like, oh, there's no one here, I'm just gonna move on. So I did that for a few years, and by this time, or a few years down the line, my second eldest sister, Sally, started sleeping in the room with my little brother and myself. We were all pretty young, and I think it was to give my eldest sister, Linny, her own room for a while. I mean, she was getting into her teens, or getting into her preteens, and that was all kinds of crazy stuff with that. So my second eldest sister started sleeping in the room with us. So then my brother and I would sleep in the large full-sized bed over to the left side of the room, and then there was a desk in between, and then on the right side there was another twin bed which my sister would sleep in. That was her own bed, and that had its own headboard, which freaked me out as well, but it actually matched my parents, so it was like this creepy set. This one night, again, my sister used to sleep there in that bed. My brother used to share the bed with me. It was a big bed, and we were small kids, so it wasn't a big deal. So this one day, my dad came home he was in the Coast Guard, and he came home from the Coast Guard exchange, and you could buy all kinds of really cool stuff on military discount. So he came home with this giant flashlight. I don't know if you've seen these flashlights. They're basically, I don't know how to describe the size of it. It was big. It's like a floodlight. It basically has one of those lantern batteries. It's a battery that's made of other batteries. And this was like late 1970s, early 1980s. So flashlight technology wasn't very good. Like today, you can get halogen lights and you can light up an entire hillside. But back then, growing up in Alaska, things weren't really available. And so the flashlights that you had they're kind of crappy. So they would barely light anything up. Like I would say barely much more than what a match would light up if you walked around. You know what I mean? Until I saw this flashlight, which again was this huge, like a lantern type flashlight that could light up a pretty good size of the room. Still not as quite as the flashlights today, but a lot more like than I was used to seeing. And I loved that thing. That thing was so it was so big and gave us so much light that I could actually feel the heat off of it, and that really gave me some comfort. So at night, sometimes I would grab that flashlight and sit in the room, and if I didn't feel good, I would turn it on and flash it on and kind of sit there with the light until I felt good, and I'd turn it off and go to sleep. So this one particular night, I was sleeping in bed, and Paul was, again, I slept closest to the wall, so I can like flush things up against it, because the only thing worse than the headboard is the actual edge of the bed. So I was up against the wall, and my brother actually slept towards the edge of the bed, and there was the headboard again, and then a desk, and then where my sister slept. So I think I was talking to him, or we were all talking until we all started slowing down and falling asleep. And I sat there, and I had the flashlight with me, but I hadn't had it on. So I was laying in bed, laying on my back, and I had all the sheets and pants and stuff that were kind of blocking the way between me and the headboard. And as I was laying there, Paul had fallen asleep. We had just finished a conversation or whatever, and we were kind of drifting off, and I was kind of wondering about the world. And I guess he had his hand underneath my pillow, so he had pulled his hand out so I could feel that you ever have that feeling where you're laying on a pillow or something and somebody pulls out from underneath and your head kind of slumps down? Well, I felt that, and I was like, oh, what the heck, sorry, man. And, like I was sleeping in your arm that whole time, that's weird. And I look over at him, and not only is he asleep, but he's actually facing the other way. And he hadn't moved, because I only felt the movement behind my head. So when I looked at him, he was looking away from me into where the desk is, or across to where my sister slept. And there's no way that he could have had his hand or his leg underneath my head. And I was just like, what the heck? And I was like, whoa, so what was behind my head? Well, I have a lot of things behind me, so it's kind of like, well, maybe something just kind of hanging over and pulled over. And then just as I said that, I thought, well, I'll check it out, because I have a flashlight, right? So I had this flashlight that made me a little bit braver, so I was able to kind of check out things. I get up, and I move the sheets out of the way, and I turn on the flashlight, and I look between one of the little arch gaps, and I could see, like, a little bit, I think it's my sock, it's a little whitish, like, but it must have been filled with clothing, because it kind of looked like, just like a filled sock sitting there. And as I flashed the flashlight on it, it kind of dropped down a little further. And I was like, oh, okay, well, one of my socks is falling down to the thing. So, again, had the flashlight, feeling good. The gap was just about the same size of my head, and maybe a little bit smaller, so I couldn't get stuck. So I leaned up against the headboard so I could look down into the gap, and I could see down in there. I could see it settle down just a little bit past the edge of the bed, and it looked like it just fallen, right? And again, just packed full of clothes, because to me it was kind of like the shape of an elbow, right? Like if you just had your elbow on the ground or on the floor and you looked at it, it kind of looked like that. And I saw it kind of settle down a little bit and then stop moving, and I thought, okay, well, just one of my white socks had fallen. And So I thought, well, I'm not going to get it now. It's still under the bed, which is kind of off and creepy. So I decided to just leave it there, and I put all my clothes and the sheets back as best as I could, and I laid back down and just thought I'll get it the next day. So I went to sleep, and the next day I totally forgot about it, because when you're a kid, you know, how much can you remember about the night before? So I remember I got up, and then must have been a weekend because we're playing around, and the sun was out, which is very unusual for this town in Ketchikan. It's usually rainforest and raining all the time. So I remember it was being sunny, and we were playing outside and kind of messing around, and I think my dad is underneath the house. House is on stilts, so he's underneath the house working, just doing his Saturday, Sunday busy garden stuff. So I'm playing outside, inside, we're kind of futzing around, and my dad comes to find me, and he says, hey, I need the flashlight. Where'd you guys put the flashlight? And I said, oh, okay, well, I'll get it. It's in the room. I left it in the bed. So I go to, my dad stays there, or goes back out to go do whatever. I'm going to bring him the flashlight. So I go to the bed, I grab the flashlight, and as I do that, I remember, oh, I gotta grab the sock from underneath the bed. So I go to the curtain, I open up the curtain so there's a lot of light. I turn on the flashlight, I look underneath the bed, and as I look underneath the bed, there's nothing there. So this filled sock, the socky arm thingy that I was looking for, was no longer there. And I thought, well, that's weird. I saw it fall and settle into the corner, and I could see where it would have been if it had just settled down there. So I thought, well, maybe that's weird. Well, maybe somebody grabbed it, which I think is strange. So I grabbed the flashlight. I take it to my dad, and I asked my brothers and sisters, hey, did you grab my sock filled with clothes from under the bed? And they're just like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, that's really kind of weird. I wonder what happened. We didn't have pets at the time, so there's nothing, and even if we did, the dogs that we had later on, they wouldn't have been able to get underneath that bed. It was pretty low to the ground. So I didn't think anything of it. I just kind of let it go. And again, this is about the time that my sisters started watching scary movies. I remember that Phantasm came on. It was a scary movie with like this silver ball that would fly around. Do horrible things to people. But if you ever saw the end of it, the guy, I think he's sitting in bed, and he looks at the mirror, and all these hands come up from under the bed, and they grab him, and they basically pull him to somewhere, something like that. I can't remember exactly, but that came out about the same time, and that totally freaked me out. And I didn't think anything about the sock, so this is some time later. I don't know how much time has passed. Again, we're sleeping. We go to bed. I am a little freaked out, so I have the flashlight on. And I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking about that time where the sock fell and feeling kind of weird. And then I start thinking about that scene, and I thought, man, that's so weird. I don't know what happened to the sock, and that show totally freaked me out. I'm like, what if that wasn't my sock? Like, what if that was like an arm or something that came to grab me? And just as I was thinking that, or at least sometime later, I had turned over on my stomach, and I was looking I was on my stomach, but I was kind of looking at my brother. We had a nightlight on, and I had my arms underneath my pillow, and I had the pillow beneath my head and laying on my stomach. And I feel this weird, like the bed, not the bed shake, but just kind of move a little bit right in front of me, right where the headboard gap is. And I'm like, what's going on? And I look at my brother really quick, and whatever it is, something comes forward, and this hand grabs my hand for just a second, and it freaks me out, and I start to like, and then it lets go, and I can feel it like almost like rush back down into the gap, and I'm like, whoa, what just happened? And I start to push all the pillows and things away. I'm trying to figure out like, what was that? And I turn the flashlight on, and I could hear, that bumping, like this bumping against the wall when you're in bed and you thump against the wall, only it's under the bed. And I'm like, what the heck was that? And I'm flashing the light at the gap, but I'm freaked out at this point. I don't know if I could stick my head out and see. And I gotta know what that was. And I kind of poke in there, and again I see something go under, and I hear it boom, 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 and kind of go away, and it's quiet. And I'm terrified, and I'm sitting there, and I have a flashlight, and I'm getting all freaky now just thinking about it, and I'm trying to figure out like what the heck happened, and I don't know what to do, so I shove everything I can into that hole, and I'm sitting there with the light, and I'm just trying to stay away from the headboard, and I kind of pushed up against my brother, and I don't know, I don't remember how I got through that. I had the flashlight with me. It was on. I think I left it on, and my dad was pissed because the next morning the lantern had gone out. It was kind of an expensive battery, but I didn't care because it kind of made me feel at least comfortable, and that heat from that light made me feel like if anything came up over the edge of the bed or anywhere, that this heat would touch whatever's coming at me and would go away. And it was weird. I tried to wake up my brother after some time, and he would not wake up. I think I actually yelled out my sister's name, Sally, and she wouldn't get up. And so I was just like in this weird place where nobody would wake up, and there was no comfort. And so when I got up the next day, I was really, really freaked out. And then I don't remember what happened. I think I tried to bring it up with my parents, and my dad is from the Philippines, and he's superstitious, but something like this is crazy, a crazy thing to talk about. So he became angry and mad at me, and like, you be a man, you can't be scared, and try to be, you're the oldest son. And I just didn't find any solace there. But at the same time, I think he felt bad because he gave me the flashlight back with a new battery and a backup battery that he told me he put on the desk. And he said, if you ever need this battery, it's here. So again, really, really weird experience. When I think back on it, it still baffles me, because when I think about this hand that touched me in the middle of my sleep that came from the headboard, in retrospect, it wasn't a cold, weird, freaky, dead feeling hand like I would expect it to be. Like this, I would imagine this pale, dead hand grabbing me and then somehow running, this arm being pulled away. But that's not what I felt. I felt like it was a warm hand, and it like just reached out, and it like knew where my hand was and just grabbed it for like a second, and then as soon as I freaked out, it let go and just kind of went away. It was just a bit weird. It was almost like somebody was trying to console me, and then figured out, oh, I'm actually freaking him out, and then let go, and it went away. So that experience, again, I don't know how to put that in my bin of experience, because I was so terrified at that moment. That's the first time, and and even since, I don't think anything's quite touched me. Like, even on investigations, I've never had anything quite as rough as that, or quite as abrupt and as firm. Like, that's a hand that's touching me, and it's grabbed my hand, and as soon as I start freaking out, it pulled away. Again, I don't know how to give that to you in a way that's, oh, that was a ghost, or that was something, or I don't know what it was. And shortly after that, my dad allowed me to sleep in my twin bed again, and I think my sisters moved in back together. And that, I don't remember what happened to the bed after that. I think he actually took the headboard away, because I don't remember seeing it years after. So that's my story about the headboard. Again, I don't know how to process that, but that's one of the things that happened to me growing up in this house. in an avenue called Hawkins in Alaska. So I hope you have a good night. Take care.